icon and living legend, Mr. P.K. Thungon, our first and former Chief Minister of Arunachal Pradesh, distinguished guests, honorable ministers, honorable members, former MLAs, and distinguished guests. I'll be very brief because much time has been given to our elder brother, and I'm not going to deal on the history of Arunachal because he has very elaborately, interestingly had dealt, Mr. Thungonji, and we are grateful to him. So, I have been allotted 15 minutes time. Therefore, I'll be very brief and allow me to read out the printed speech, written speech, in order to save the precious time of August gathering. So, it was in the year 1980. My dream debut in public life began as the Speaker of Legislative Assembly. From there on, there was no turning back, and my journey in public life continued uninterrupted to become Speaker of Arunachal Assembly for 2 consecutive terms. I was young in my mid-30s then. Naturally, I had mixed reactions of thrill, joy, delight, and fulfillment. At the same time, I was also nervous and anxious to hold such a big responsibility. For I, as a young man then, had heard and witnessed the parliamentary functionings, the fiery debates, ruckus, commotion, tension, and emotion in the parliament. While rejoicing the office, the role and responsibility as the custodians of the rules to maintain orderly functioning of the legislature was always in my mind, and that kept me aware, agile, alive, and conscious. Standing before you here brings back memories of 45 years ago when I was Speaker. Some untold tales that sound like classic stories to the young generation today. Some may sound incredible today, but we are all true. 45 years ago, the environment of overall landscape in all the fields were quite different from today. When I first assumed the chair of Speaker, it was still Union territory. Our legislative institution was in infancy, developing, evolving, and learning to walk with the rest of the nation. There was only 30 elected MLAs and 3 nominated, representing 5 districts then. And as Union territory, we were entitled only 5 cabinet ministers. The early years came with several challenges. The assembly functioned out of a modest Assam-type structure building in Naharlagun with limited sittings, inadequate ventilations, and no catering facility as such. MLAs were not allotted official vehicles and permanent accommodation. Only a modest travel allowance and single-room accommodation in MLA hostel, the 2 during the session time. But those constraints could not dampen the collective spirit of our members who worked tirelessly, relentlessly for the people they represented. What made those years special was the caliber of leadership. The opposition bench were graced by stalwart like Tomoriba, Bakin Patin, Okenlego, Onyakrome, and Wangla Luangcha, to name few. They were the leaders of commitment, intellect, and integrity. Today, at the mention of their names, my mind is flooded with vivid memories of how this opposition, with a meager number, could take on the powerful, full-strength government on many issues through their eloquence, fiery speeches, and deliberations. Thumping the decks, voice loud and clear, asking the government to reply and justify on many developmental issues. On the whole, the debate The argument was productive, constructive, progressive, positive, and healthy. On the treasury benches, we had distinguished names such as Gegong Apang, Tarak Dolom, Tarak Tang, Mukut Biti, Sobeng Tang, Tarak Basar, Dorji Khandu, Sring Tasi, to name few. The House came alive with passionate debates, ideological clashes, and sincere deliberations. Yet outside our assembly, the same members would embrace each other like best of old friends, sharing meals, laughter, playing badminton and indoor games. It was a democracy at its best. Adversarial in debates, but unified in purpose. Ours was an union territory with many shortfalls. That common hardships and struggle became a common strength to strengthen the spirit, the unity and solidarity of all members cutting across party lines. Those were the days when most of the villages, particularly in the remote areas, were not connected by motorable roads. To reach these far-flung communities, we had no option but to travel by foot, sometimes days together. We shared humble meals in the bamboo huts, warmed by the fireside, and sat shoulder to shoulder with the village elders under the starlit sky, listening intently to their hopes, struggle, and dreams. Every step of the way, we lean on each other's strength, driven by a shared belief that politics is not about power, but about service. It was a journey of heart and grit, a collective mission to the voice of the unheard, and a living bridge between the government and the people. With extremely limited funding resources those days, the programming and executions of the developmental schemes in various areas were quite difficult. Demands of the people were much more than the fund, availability of the fund. Hence, it was very difficult to content and satisfy everybody, all public. However, our MLA had developed. They could master the art and diplomacy to wisely keep the people happy and contented. Those days, MLAs were provided for the area development around 15 lakhs or so. Friends, those days, the seat of MLAs were not bed of roses. They were thorns also. They were thorns with a very limited funds, an absence of motorable roads, an absence of basic infrastructure. The members were hence vulnerable to public criticism, rag, and resentment. With attainment of statehood, Legislative Assembly Secretariat underwent a profound transformation. Members were given vehicles, independent cottages, and enhanced salaries and allowances. Over the years, the Assembly Secretariat saw tremendous growth. Magnificent new building in the heart of the capital town of Itanagar, where we are standing now, is a proof of is a proud symbol of how far we have reached. Friends, the world is dynamic, and everything comes to an end. That's the natural phenomena. A day will come, you will also be old and retired and go back to your village and people. I have seen life while in power. I have also seen life being out of power. Hence, I have seen closely and I understood better what life is. More than, I think, many of you. Because you are yet to see the life after your retirement. So therefore, I say, friends, the people remember us, not by the position and power we hold, but by the footprint that we leave behind through our good deeds. When we enter politics for the first time, we are innocent. ignorant, unaware about commotion, emotion, wrong and right, sadness, happiness, gain, loss, aggressive and submissive. Then over the period, it doesn't take much time to get to know that, to get to know what politics is all about. You learn to become more agile, alive, and aware of situations and surroundings that shape your vision, your decision, and action. So there is sad and wrong perception about the politicians all over the world that see politicians as dishonest and corrupt. But then corruption is a universal phenomenon that had existed since time immemorial. History tells us how in ancient time mighty kings, great rulers and leaders have fell victims and succumbed, how great empires have collapsed. But those days there were no elected assembly, there were no elected parliament, there were no elected leaders. The might was right. Yet there was corruption, there was dishonesty. Therefore, I may be permitted to say that corruption exists in many forms. It is not only directed, or we should not only cast experts into the politics or the politician of public life. I feel that there is corruption in every field. There is corruption, there is social corruption, there is moral corruption, there is corruption in, there can be corruption in judiciary, executive, bureaucratic, even in big business houses. Therefore, I feel that to single out the politicians or the people who in public life and brand them as a corrupt and dishonest is entirely unfair. Nevertheless, the members ought to be very cautious, careful, tactful, and wise in your action, both in the house, both in the office as well as outside office. Friends, on this occasion, I would like to tell you about something that is very relevant. To serve the people more effectively and befittingly, you need to be physically and mentally fit. A sickly mother produces a sickly child. Similarly, a weak and a sickly leader will produce a sickly performance and sickly result. Here I would like to say that remind you that you are what you eat. You are what you drink. So choose, think, careful what you drink and what you eat. Because food can kill and the food can also heal. Therefore, you must eat your food like the medicine. Otherwise, later you may have to eat medicine like your food. It was a matter of great honor and privilege to be a custodian of the temple of democracy of this beautiful land of rising sun. Looking back, those days remain etched in my memory, not just for the position I held, but for the incredible experience that shaped me, both as a public servant and as a person in the journey of my life. Though I had lived in many towns, cities, and places, and also got a chance to travel around, I saw and seen, felt and learned, and understood the world much more. Also did many creative and productive things with your all support over the past years since retiring from active public life. One thing had always remained the same. One thing had always said the same, that I am a former speaker, I am a former minister. This identity no one can take away. So also the identity that you have now, or the identity that you will have tomorrow, or the future, no one can take away that. So build a good identity. And for this eternal identity that I carry today, and which I shall be carrying it till the end of my life. I owe so much to the beautiful people of this land. अगर समय किसी के लिए रुकता नहीं, अगर समय किसी के लिए रुकता नहीं, हम क्यों सही समय के लिए रुके? जो समय अब है वही सही समय है. तो डोंट. सहारा न बना ये दिल, सहारा टूट जाता है. सहारा न बना ये दिल, सहारा टूट जाता है. किस्मत पर भरोसा न कर, किनारा छूट जाता है. मन तन धन से मेहनत करे, सब कुछ हो जाता है. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the patient hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your thoughtful reflections and for sharing your invaluable insights drawn from years of service to the House